Hello there, welcome back to another set of shows. Today is my final week of shows for a little bit. I'm taking a few weeks off. I've got other things in real life to deal with, but I'll be back fairly soon. It's just a couple of weeks, really. So I'm finishing off with a bunch of shows. So I've got another reprehensible top tens. I've got some old-fashioned EIP pulps, and I have something to Guar. But first of all, I'm going to go on to the Ten Commandments and Exodus, which are the two Moses films that, in my biblical epic series I seem to be doing now, of all these biblical epics, from the olden Hollywood time and the modern times. I never bothered watching the original Ten Commandments, Cecil DeMille, which apparently most of it is a modern story anyway, and it was just a bit Moses, so I never bothered with that. So I just went for the 1950s version and the more modern version directed by Ridley Scott. Because I thought that'd be a good contrast between two different styles of Hollywood filmmaking, where on the one side you have, Cecil B. DeMille in his final film with all the Hollywood structure behind him, giving him all the money he needs to make his film, spend a fortune on a film that is made by someone who seems to, you could say, was a bit of a believer. He did a lot of religious films and he seems to believe in the word of God and things. And then you have Exodus, which is made by Ridley Scott, who I think he's pretty much confirmed he's pretty skeptical of most religious things, and it comes through in the film. So it's two different approaches to the Moses story. One by someone who's not looking for tons of explanation, one who's asking for way too much explanation, one whose sense of wonder is accepting of almost anything, and one whose sense of wonder is very unaccepting and wants a reality for everything. So you get imbalances in both films. One that's too reverential and not human enough, and another one that's way too questioning and kind of dull at times. You have two very different Moses. You've got Charlton Heston's Moses, which is a decent performance, but it's not full on 60s Heston. He's still finding his feet in film a little bit. I don't think I think there's some points where he's better than other points, really. And the more he's into Moses as a deliverer, the more he falls on the shtick, Heston type shtick. That if you're young, it looks really cool, but as you're older, it's like that could be done a bit better. Bale's actually a more interesting Moses, more questioning Moses. He's like the best part of the Exodus film by a long mile. So he's like a really interesting. His performance in Exodus is actually one of the things where he's better than the film he's in. Like the film he's in should raise to his performance level. That's the kind of difference where in one film, in Ten Commandments, the film's carrying Heston to a degree and using the story, it's carrying Heston. And this one, another one, Christian Bale's carrying the film. So there is a difference and imbalance really in the films. So I'll start with the Ten Commandments. And Ten Commandments is a mega budget Hollywood film. Now, I watched both of these projected so I could get a sense of the scale. Both of them on 4K, so I managed to get all the details down. And you could sense of where the heads were at with the film. One's 4 hours long, one's 3 hours long. So they're both like epic films. They're both got like at their core, they are not modest productions. They want you to know that they're doing a big, serious film about a big, important subject. It's based in the Bible. It has to be serious. But one of them is the Ten Commandments. It could have done more sense of humor. Is the best way to put it. I mean, the most of the humor comes from Edward G. Robinson. He's playing a villain who's like the guy who is like he's Jewish, but he kind of goes with the Egyptians a lot of the time, and then he ends up with his own people, with Moses as they leave Egypt, and he's like he's meant to be the evil villain of the piece, but he's actually the most entertaining thing in the film. So it's like it goes against your kind of I'm supposed to hate him, but he's a sense of humor. You've also Anne Baxter, who's going way over the top and way campy as the wife of Ramesses. Again, she's so much more fun than anyone else in the film. It's like, God, just give them more of these type of performances that are completely over the top, completely without subtlety. Except they're actually decent actors who understand them in hokum. They're playing some ridiculous lines, and they're adding some lots of human touches amidst the over the top acting. And they're the kind of performances you like. I mean, whenever Heston's with Baxter, he seems to be a lot more alert and on edge. He seems to be enjoying himself a lot more as an actor. When he's being Moses and being the guy who's, you know, carrying the weight of his world on his shoulders, it's a lot less fun. You know, the first half of this film was a lot more enjoyable than the second half, to be honest. It's because your leading character pretty much changes a lot over a small period of time. And he goes from being a character who's got some understandable problems to someone who's Moses, basically, the iconic Moses who is speaking for God. And it's a less interesting character, ultimately. But in the first half, Heston's the Prince of Egypt, basically. Yeah, there was a film called Prince of Egypt, which was an animated film with Moses as well. I never bothered with that one. Basically, he's like he was found by his parent put him in a basket. You see that section. Played straight is basically the sister of the Pharaoh finds him, takes him in as her own, and he becomes a Prince of Egypt, and he's like the competent one. Ramesses II is the least competent one. He's like the guy who's going to be king, and he's like a showboat played by Yul Brynner. Moses is the one who's actually good at stuff. He's the one who had to work his way up because he wasn't the favored son. And he's the one who gets sent to fight battles. He's the one who gets sent to build stuff that he's built because Ramesses doesn't pay attention to details. And Moses does. And Moses is the one who's really into making the kingdom work. And he doesn't really think about the Jewish slaves. That's part of his life. He's not been taught to think about them. Then, of course, the two developments happen. One, Ramesses is now starting to see him as a threat because the Seti, the king, has more or less said, look, I might not go by blood for who becomes the next pharaoh. It might be Moses because he's actually competent, so you better buck up your ideas a little bit to Ramesses. And Ramesses is actually sending someone to it's actually getting talking to people and trying to find out, who's this Jewish leader they have, this person they say is going to lead them out of bondage. At the same time, he's worried about Moses and he's trying to make Moses look bad, not realizing they're one and the same person. And because that's the plot line, the first half of the movie, even though Ramesses shouldn't know it's the same person, it kind of looks kind of thick for not realizing both the genders are the same person. So it's a contrivance that actually makes the character look stupider. Then when Moses finds out about his heritage, he starts to investigate it and become guilt-ridden about how he never understood his heritage before, and he starts to he goes underground to actually live the life of a slave for such a point to see what his life's like and starts to see how horrible it is. And this is where the film starts to get very self-serious as Moses becomes a less enjoyable character because if you know Heston, Charlton Heston, actor, when he's being somber and when he's being dramatic, sometimes he becomes a bit dull. You know, he's an actor who needs, distractions to keep him interesting. He can be a very solid actor. So sometimes you make him cynical, he's much more fun. Or you give him something fun to do, give him a challenge. But here he's asked to be somber and to be like basically the instrument of God. So he falls into some of his less interesting acting dynamics. So he's emoting in a 50s style emoting, but it's not that interesting. And it's like, give me some of the camper performances, please. And anytime with some of those like Edward G. Robinson around back, so turn up. It's like, oh, thank God, they're fun. They can mess with them a little bit, and we can keep this interesting. But that's the kind of problem for the film, is that Heston is not that interested in Moses when he has to become like Uber Moses, the man to defend his people. So the story goes on where his parentage is discovered that he's Jewish, and then he kind of becomes a leader. He's thrown out of the kingdom. He has to obviously go to the cross the Red Sea to the other land where he gets married, and then he goes to see the burning bush. The burning bush is done with a lot of old style special effects, but they're very enjoyable. I like 50 special effects. They don't have much money, and the thing with this film is, costume wise, set wise, it's really wonderful to watch. An old style craftsmanship involved in the film. And it's obvious the director enjoys all this stuff. I mean, Cecil B. DeMille gets a lot of slack for his films, but you can sense he's enjoying himself a lot, the production side of this film, and he's really having fun with it. The second half is fun when you have the plagues come down. I mean, the plagues are enjoyable, the way they're done. And the whole section of them finally forcing Ramesses to let Moses' people go. All that stuff's really enjoyable. But it's just Heston can be a bit, it's that thing is, obviously they wanted one actor to do the whole story, but when Heston's aged up, it's one of those things that might have worked better with an older actor aged down a little bit, but maybe that'll look fake, who knows? But he doesn't have the authority we'd have in a few years during these scenes that would have really helped him. So, and I've read somewhere that Heston didn't think he was that great in this film. It was just one of those ones where he thought he was fine, but nothing great. And you can see why, because he was just much better as he got older. But the actual story itself, because the Moses story is a very good story. Even if you're not a believer, the story is really rock solid. You've got someone who rises, then falls, and has to re-rise and be less about himself and more about the people he's trying to save. And if you stick to that simple story, it'll work because it's a good story. There's a reason. One of the reasons that it's got people's imagination going for so long is the story is really solid. The story is really interesting. The Red Sea is a bit we all remember from childhood. It's one of those iconic sequences. Even though nowadays you can tell how they did it with special effects, and if you watch the making of programs, you can see all those details. But it still works. You can, suspend your disbelief. You can enjoy the part of the Red Sea and all those sequences with Yul Brynner leading the chariots through the water. Or he hasn't. He says it's people to lead them through the water. He leads them to the water and then lets them go further. You've got the burning saving them, stopping them from going through the Red Sea until it's proper time. So you've got all this stuff happening. It all works wonderfully. Then finally you have the sequence that DeMille seemed to enjoy way too much, which is when they've escaped from Egypt and are in the desert. And before they get the Ten Commandments, they go a bit nuts. And it's a film about you have to follow these commandments. But the sin part of the film, the director seems to really enjoy. That's kind of the thing, is it is an enjoyable sequence, actually. It's the modern films tell me one thing, but for pure entertainment, this is really fun, seeing how crazy it's getting. But it's that feeling of, the sense that the film is creating a spectacle. It's not an internal film. It's not a film about the internal process of Moses. It's a big screen entertainment. It's about the process of getting from A to B, from Moses going from a child to being a Egyptian to being the leader of Jews to escape, and then they escape and fall, and then basically 40 years of traveling before they reach the River Jordan. So it's a really enjoyable film. It's just got some flaws. Some of the script writing is not great, but the actual story itself pulls it through. Some of the dialogue's not great. Some of the overproduction looks like a studio set because it was. So there's lots of stuff there that you could pick holes in, but it still works pretty well, especially for a 4-hour film. Some of the actors, the guy playing Josh was John Derek, who made 10 with Bo Derek and did lots of like cross stuff later on. He's not very good as Joshua. Joshua's the kind of character is like he should be important, but he's really doesn't really work with the casting. And Noah's wife is okay, but Noah, Moses' wife, it's fine, but a bit movie starish. But it's still an enjoyable film. You know, it's actually one of those films you look at years later and go, okay, that still works for what it is. It works overall better than Exodus. Exodus is one of those films that doesn't quite deliver, even though it goes the story in an interesting way. The problem with the film is that Ridley Scott is a non-believer. It really comes through in the film is he's trying to find explanations for everything, for all the miracles that would beset them in the second half of the film, and he's really not believing the strength of the story. For example, he never has them reach Jordan at the end. It's just implied they'll reach it. He never. The Red Sea is done differently than it was the old film, and it's done supposedly with realism, but it's still basically you're swapping something simple for something that's more complicated and more ethereal, but it doesn't quite work as well. And a lot of the story beats seem to be going against the simplicity of the story. You have to say we're more sophisticated in this. Like we understand the story better, and it's like you really don't. You don't understand the simplicity of it. They don't even have the most famous part, which is Moses as a baby in a basket floating down the River Nile. That's not in the film. It's referred to later on. In the film, you basically get Moses doing his passage of from being prince to being an outcast once he discover his roots. Yeah, Ramesses is jealous of him because he's much more competent than Ramesses. But it's not like it doesn't really feel like it's like that. It doesn't feel as well developed as the old version. It's simplified. You're feeling it's from jealousy and Ramesses not feeling that he's appreciated, and he wants rid of Moses once he gets some dirt on him. And there's lots of stuff like Ben Mendelsohn as the overseer of the slaves who digs up the dirt on Moses to get rid of him. But the section of the film, the reason it kind of works is because it's Christian Bale doing it, and he's playing a guy who's trying to understand his own roots and trying to understand where he fits in, and not quite fitting in, and not quite feeling he fits in anywhere. And it's the kind of atmosphere his performance gives the film. It really pulls it together. Because this film has bits going everywhere. You get the epic stuff. They start with a battle scene, just have a battle scene. Because they need to remind you that Ridley Scott did Gladiator. They have to have a battle scene. Even though it's pretty much the same as Gladiator's battle scenes. Then you go into the deal with Moses as a prince, but you don't get that much of that. All you get is realizing he's very practical and he's very focused on getting things done. And then when he finds out what his history actually was, he's disturbed by him not understanding what's going on. And you see some jealousy from the court. But again, it's really what Bale's doing that works. The rest of the thing is it's trying to tell a story in a more modern way, but it's kind of obscuring the story because it's not going for simple beats, because it feels that the film feels embarrassed by the simple beats of the story. It feels like it's trying to be more sophisticated than it needs to be. And then when the film goes on to the section where Moses actually is exiled, it really comes together a lot more, because this is where this film is much stronger than the Ten Commandments. The whole section of Moses going from leaving Egypt to finding God in the mountain feels much stronger here, because it's a guy who's lost everything, and it gives Bale someone to play. He gets to play the sense of someone who has been cast out, and he has tried to figure himself out. And it's just a sense of angst about where his life's gone, and he's just trying to survive something horrific. And you do get a sense of his character, like he's okay with disappearing from the world and just having a quiet life, but he's dragged back into the fight by the figure of God, who in this case is played by a young boy, like a teenage boy who's speaking for God. And that's one of the things the film does not work. It's like they're basically taken in the Last Temptation of Christ, they had a little girl playing the devil, and they're taking that idea, because that idea came from Kill Baby Kill and from Mario Bava. And then now Scorsese used it on Last Temptation of Christ, and now he did, with the Scots used it for Voice of God. And it doesn't work because the actor that got up playing the kid is not that interesting. He can't really deliver the sense of like speaking for something beyond. It just tells you the director doesn't believe in the story, and he's trying to do something clever to get around that. And it creates that kind of gap in the film, which is a problem, because the film is really finding its feet at this point, where you've seen Moses suffer, and he's actually climbing the Mount Sinai. He's actually found his purpose, and he's going to go back and freeze people. And he's still trying to come to terms with what his history is, which is another thing that works, because Bale does feel angstful, and he does feel like he's determined to get somewhere, and he's not quite sure how he's going to do it. He's going to do it, which that comes across a lot more in this film than it does in the Ten Commandments, where Heston felt a little bit too sure of himself in the second half, which is, I think, the thing that bugs me, is like he seems like he's gone from a searcher to a man who knows what he's doing a lot, just way too quickly, and he can answer anything as the word of God, and it just you lose the human contact. And this one, you keep the human contact. It's like this is a guy who's been tortured by the visions, and he's having to push through and use the visions to actually help him create something to freeze people. So that really helps. But the fact that Ridley Scott obviously is not a believer really doesn't help the second half, where you're getting lots of explanations for the plagues. Well, Ridley Scott loves doing the special effects of the plagues. He really is enjoying himself. But there's no momentum to the build of the plagues. It's just one thing after another, and it just feels like endless scenes of special effects. It's like, yeah, the director's enjoying himself, but there's no accumulation the way you would to actually suggest like character beats. So a lot of character beats get lost here. Like they're thrown into the scenes, but you're not really feeling them because everything's been mistimed, and the film lacks the simplicity of the old film of this comes here, this comes here, this is the obvious progression. It's just things happening. And no matter how interesting Bale is as Moses, trying to deal with a god who seems unreasonable, and also dealing with Ramesses who's unreasonable, and Moses has been tortured by his visions, and it cannot really communicate them to anyone else. Even Joshua, who's played by Aaron Paul in this one, again, he's more interesting than Ten Commandments one, but he's not really given enough to do. And the film really does have a sense of, okay, this is really meaty stuff. The idea of them becoming a rebellion within Egypt, and basically becoming terrorists to threaten Ramesses, and then essentially the plagues of descent. And it's only at the end that Ramesses, when he loses his son, does he relent. And then at some point he decides, oh, I'm going to kill them, and chases after them. all of that stuff should be solid. Even though there's some flaws in the Ten Commandments for this stuff, it was still really solid and doesn't work. Because the way it's built up. It's going too fast, so it needs like 10, 15 minutes of mood. But also the simplicity of the old version and the sense of someone who's at least open to belief would have helped instead of someone who's actually avoiding the subject, even with a religious film. That becomes a real problem. And it becomes a thing around the film's neck when you get to the part of the Red Seas. So already, by the time he's got people out, it already feels like it's been a slog through the plagues. And then when he gets to the Red Sea, it's like there's no part of the Red Sea. It's basically the water falls from being a sea to being almost nothing. And they cross it, and as they're crossing, they realize that there's the suggestion is there's been an earthquake somewhere, and a tsunami's going to come in and bring the water back at some point, which is a try to find a realistic way to explain something that was miraculous in the story. And it just takes away all the magic of the story. It takes away all the iconography of the story. It's like you've a director who fundamentally doesn't understand the story. He doesn't understand the emotion of the story. He doesn't understand why it means stuff to people, why it means so much to certain people. He doesn't get it. So Exodus actually is a film that's not quite delivering what it needs to deliver. So it's a very frustrating film. And then when you get to the below Mount Sinai with the Ten Commandments, you don't even see him delivering. You see him writing them with instructions from God, but he doesn't actually deliver them to his people. Then eventually you see him in an older Moses traveling through the desert looking for their homeland, which obviously would be Israel. But there's so many iconic points that the film should have delivered on that it doesn't, because it's like it's embarrassed by the simplicity of its own story. It's just a mess of a film by a director who doesn't have any faith in what he's doing. And that's what kills the film. No matter what Bale's doing, he's doing his best to keep us interesting. Ridley Scott keeps on destroying it with just like it's that thing when you see a film made by like someone doing a comic book adaptation and they're thinking above it, and they miss all the main spots that are of interest for people who actually paid money to go see it. It's the same with this one. It's like for people who want to see a new version of the Moses story, this film does not deliver anything you really want, which is why it didn't do that well. It's like a guy who thinks he's too big, too good for the story. So the Ten Commandments is obviously the better film, even though Exodus has a better central performance. It's just like because it wasn't embarrassed for what it was, and Exodus is, and that's a real problem. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll be back soon with some more. That's me for now. Right, bye. Once I finish properly.